Hey guys, super excited. Today I am heading up to Monroe, Michigan. Josh Phillips' house. It's about a half hour, 40 minutes from now. It's Saturday morning, just fed the fish. So they're good to go. Gonna head up there, do a fish room tour. It's a room I've wanted to get to for a while. He just moved about a year ago, rebuilt this room to what he wants it to be from his last fish room. So I'm excited to kind of see what he's learned from the last fish room, but also I'm a Pleco guy too, and I know he's got a Pleco wall. So let's see what he's got going on. I look forward to it, guys. Come along with the tour and let's see what he's got going on. Hey guys, we're up here in Monroe, Michigan with Josh Phillips in his fish room. Josh, I know I've been super excited about coming up to your fish room. You got a lot of super rare, super cool fish that I personally am into. So I've been waiting and biting the bit for you to make the move here and allow me to come in and kind of tour this beautiful fish room. Why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so like Corey said, I'm Josh Phillips. I'm part of one of the founding members of Northwest Ohio Aquarium Society. I've been in fish keeping pretty heavy for getting close to 10 years. Like everybody, I kept fish as a kid. Got back in like right after I moved out in my first apartment. Discovered Planet Tank, kind of fell in love with it all again, and from there kind of developed a love for breeding fish and Plecos. And I'd like to say I focus mostly on Plecos and nanofish. So this is a very compact fish room. I try to keep everything kind of small because I don't keep anything, over about 5 inches.
We're starting this off on the first rack of his fish room here, and it looks like what you have, what, 7,
10 gallons and out for mostly fry rearing, hatching eggs, and then growing out in their kind of first stage for some species, and then some of these are breeding tanks.
So I guess let us know, what do you got going on in this tank here?
So this first tank, this is kind of like my rainbow hatch out tank so far. Right now there's a bunch of Precocks, the dwarf neon rainbow in there. These are probably like 2 to 3 months old. They're a really slow grower, but this is basically 2 days worth of spawning, pulling them up, putting in here and waiting for them to hatch out. And I probably have 50 or 60 in there at this point that are kind of where they should be pretty stable.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was interesting when I was kind of looking at your fish room when I first came in here today. You were telling me what's nice about them is, it's when you got enough, you have enough. But then when you want some, you have, and we'll see later here. You got some mops in there with the parents, and you can just kind of pull those mops and you're good to go.
Yeah, I really love breeding rainbows in general. It's kind of difficult to do it for any sort of profit. Not that everything I breed is with profit in mind, but because they grow so slowly, they take a long time to grow out in general. Like it'll be 6-8 months before they're kind of what I call sellable size. But they're one of my favorite fish in rainbows, and in general, I always want to have that like school of 50 whenever I have a room set up. So
yeah,
they're just kind of fun and nice and really beautiful fish, both males and females. They're one of my favorite.
All right, so we're gonna move to this next tank here, right here. So it looks like we got, and we're gonna have to do the best to adjust with some of this because a lot of the stuff Josh has is obviously in caves or breeding tubes or so forth. So we're gonna try and get you guys the best look at what he has got going on here. But what's going on in here?
Yeah, so there's two things in here, and the little cave up front is a Peacock Gudgeon breeding pair, and the male is just on eggs. I don't know if the female is still in there. I didn't really look that closely.
I think so. Do you got a light by chance?
Yeah, my flashlight right here.
Yeah. See if you can.
So, you know, I do a lot of cave
she's
spawners.
there.
Makes it awkward to kind of see stuff, but the Peacock Gudgeons, they'll actually breed just like Plecos pretty much. The male will catch the female in there. They'll get the eggs, kick the female out, and then he'll fan them until they hatch. At that point is where I kind of pull them most of the time. I do have one fry that's kind of in here that's growing up. That's pretty surprising because most of the time they get picked off eventually. But they're really neat, nice fish that I really enjoy breeding because of that behavior. And then I also have these wild type Livebearers. It was really hard to find anything much about them. I actually bought them off of Aquabid. I think they're like yellow belly gumboses or something like that. I'm not good with their name. I can't pronounce their scientific name at all. I've been told that this line is a bit bred, like line bred to bring out the yellow in the males. The males have kind of like a whole yellow stripe under their bellies. The females kind of look, you know, like a guppy with some vertical striping. But something I saw on Aquabid that was only like $15, so it was like twice as much or 3 times as much to ship it, but something I don't see and that's relatively cheap. And so when I see stuff like that piques my interest, especially in the Livebearers, microfish and stuff, I like to bring it in because that's a good way to kind of get fish to our local club area that otherwise wouldn't end up in the local scene.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really neat fish. That's the male there, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and they seem to really have a lot of variation as to like when the male's showing the yellow color like throughout the day and if it's stressed or something. So sometimes you see it and it's like almost a neon yellow belly on it. So.
All right, let's move into the next tank here.
So this is a grow out for, these are some older Celebes rainbows. These I've started bringing to the VAP already at our local club. And they're all ready to sell. I'm kind of just saving the rest of them for our swap meet that's coming up.
Okay.
But what's cool in this tank that's the actual grow out is there's Plecos in the back of the cave. And those are L306. They're a Peacock Pleco. And these are a line from Eric Bodrock, who's a really, really famous breeder, runs all oddball aquatics, does really, really nice selective breeding on his stock. So that's something where I was really excited to go and have the opportunity to buy them. So I got them as very small fry, and it'll take probably 2-3 years for them to grow out to be breeding size on something like this. So it's a waiting game, but a really cool Pleco that I've been interested in for a long time.
Yeah, those are really cool, and especially because they're from Eric. And then what do you have going on here?
These aren't much of anything. These are 2 female Pistogramma ZZI double reds. I bought them kind of small. We thought at the store they might have been a pair, so now I'm just kind of waiting on getting a male to add in there and do some Apisto breeding, which is one of my favorite. I don't know about other people. I've almost always had better luck with caves like this, where they're the terracotta caves that have opened the top little hole up further. You can get the like dwarf cichlid caves that you buy that are cremated. I have one in a tank we'll see in a little bit here. But I haven't had any Apisto breeding. They definitely seem to really like the smaller opening that's more secure. In general, most of these dwarf cichlids. So that would be my kind of one breeding tip for them is they want to be able to keep most things out if they can.
Cool. Yeah, that's you can see they're getting to size. They're getting to a good size there, the females. This is a really cool one here. I caught my eye when I walked into the fish room. What do you got going on here?
These are technically really my dad's stock. He invested in them, but they're for the true zebra L46 hyphen citrus zebra. They they're the expensive, most people's
holy grail fish.
Pleco.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few Plecos that are, more expensive than them.
Yeah.
But this is the one you'll actually see in the store and stuff. But these are all captive bred and everything already. So the goal is to spawn them. They're actually pretty close to spawning adult size already. Something like some of the tanks you'll see later, all my Pleco stock, I quarantined for a very long time. One, I feel like almost every Pleco you get in has some sort of internal parasite.
100%.
So you definitely work on getting them clean from that way so they can be as healthy as possible. But two, if you get into the cycle of breeding too early with Plecos, they haven't grown to their full maturity or haven't had proper fat in their diet for a while, I feel like it can really kind of make them a lot weaker. So
I agree with that 100%. What do you suggest? Like, what do you do? Let's say you bring in a wild caught or whatever Pleco that are obviously are susceptible to the parasite. What is your procedure? Like, what do you feel good doing, treating them wise, or anything? Is there anything special you do, or do you just quarantine more and watch? I know there's different schools of thoughts on that.
I run Prezi Pro through pretty much everything.
That's what I do, yeah.
But I have horses as well, and we worry about warming way more in horses than about any other animal because they're eating the vegetation where the worms will. Plecos very much eat at the bottom of the tank where they're most likely to eat the worm eggs and cause problems. So I bring that school kind of to the fish, where I try to rotate 2 or 3 wormers. And that doesn't mean necessarily 2 or 3 different brands, but active ingredient. Like the Prezi Pro is praziquantel's the active ingredient. But you can use fenbendazole in some ways in fish. You can use I'm trying to think of the one that is used for the camelinus worms. His specific name is levamisole.
Okay.
Another one that's a good dewormer. So I try to rotate a couple through. You don't want to hit them all at once, or one right after the other, because any medication, especially dewormers, are meant to kill stuff. So I don't want to stress their immune system 4 or 5 times. Yeah. And then the other thing is I try to run quite a bit of brine shrimp through, which kind of helps clear the system a little bit.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. And if believe it or not, isn't there also you have a crib back here?
Yeah, I have a breeding pair of albino cribs, and that's the female. Yeah. They're having a little bit of a domestic dispute about whether the fry should stay in the cave or come out, and she was getting a little beat up. So the nice thing about none of these tanks up here have any special water. The room's heated, so they're all the exact same temperature. I can just pull a fish when something like that's happening, move it over, plop it into a different one. So I pulled the female, and the male is living and raising the fries as a single dad. We'll get to him in a second.
Perfect. And then this is something that is extremely neat, and we had at the club this month a bull show, and this was something that you brought to the bull show, correct?
Yeah, this is one of those you get when you go to a store, especially someplace big. These came from Gerber's Tropical Fish, which is the biggest fish store in all of Ohio. You go through and you see something that catches your eye, and didn't really know a ton about them ahead of time. It's a Killifish. I don't think it even has a common name. It's a Nanochromis species, I believe, but I forget the whole. I always have to go back to my notes. But it's one of the annual Killifish that has to have a dry season for breeding. But all the males, pretty much, of those types of Killifish are absolutely spectacular looking. And so I've been wanting to try some of the peat moss spawning dry seasons. You can see at the top of the tank there's some of the peat moss that's escaped on my first couple of attempts, and I'll show kind of in a minute how I'm trying to prepare moss for the next one, because the actual act of getting the peat moss in a container in the tank was way harder than YouTube made it out to be.
It's always, yes.
But that's kind of like one of those fish that I was walking down the aisle and I just had to stop at, and I wasn't planning on buying any fish, and walked around the store 3 times and kept coming back, so I decided to buy the pair.
Yeah.
And then I have some Habrosus cories in there too. That is a fish that I've had 4 or 5 times. I end up rehoming in some fashion, but I always come back to because they're my favorite of the dwarf cory species. Yep. Because they actually act like cories. They're not as much of a mid swimmer as the pygmy cories are and stuff. So I liking nanofish, the smallest of things I find cool. So I always come back to those and add some back into my collection.
Looks like we might even have some breeding behavior there.
Yeah, that's definitely the male kind of taking around, and they're probably spawning in the little bits that are just in the bottom. I need to move them to something that's bare bottom so I can collect all that extra peacock. But basically, you have to put them in a Ziploc baggie or something for 6 months. They need like a 6-month dry period. They have it real long.
This is interesting to hear you talking about this, because I don't know anything really about Killies, and I just got a pair at the club show last week, or earlier this month. So I'm just starting to read up and kind of just get them healthy, and they were healthy, but keeping them fat and seeing what I got to do. And then next here, I see a ton of little eyes looking at me.
Yeah, so that's the albino crib breeding tank I was talking about. And, that's the dad with a bunch of the babies. It looks like something I didn't know. I wanted the albino strain of cribs. I just love their breeding behavior. They'll, unlike Apistos, where the cloud will kind of be just wherever they want to go, Kribensis keep their fry in a pretty tight school for quite a while and kind of herd them around the tank. So I love that breeding behavior. I've had the regular cribs before. The albino is just kind of stunning, I think.
I agree.
So I like that breeding behavior. I like the albino is a much more attractive fish. It does look like I might get some albino and some brown. It's hard to tell at this stage, but not all of the fry necessarily look albino. Which I kind of thought they'd all be albino, but that's just not knowing genetic backgrounds and so on.
I mean, maybe it's just the way I'm looking at the screen, but you can see it looks like it's almost 75-25.
Yeah, which would, makes sense if one of them has, not a straight, if you go back to your little tables of genetics, makes sense. So, which is fine, they're not impossible to offload. Kribensis is one of those things I like to donate to the local store because they sell relatively well for them. It's hard to resell in the hobby.
Sure.
But it's something that I really enjoy, that breeding behavior and how he's pushing them all around the tank. And
it's neat.
It's enjoyable to me, so it's something I enjoy watching.
He's definitely trying to put us in our place right now as we're filming this. So, all right. So now we're going to go down lower here to down below here. And what do we have going on here?
So this is the first of like 3 of my tanks that I would consider my breeding for profit tanks. This one's probably the most mature. These are a line of guppy. They're blue mosaic, half-moon guppies. These came from Prius Pets, and I think Rick works with several of these lines. I think this is one of them he works with. The females are just absolutely gorgeous. Yeah. The color on the male is not all that straight blue, so I don't know if I'll be able to call them blue long term. So my fry, I'm already getting some red in. But like, as far as giant females that are really healthy, obviously they're really, really nice. So I've got a ton of those going. But I gave a talk at our club a few months back about building layers. So I have Java moss working in here, which is a good plant to kind of grow and be able to sell basically unlimited amounts as fast as you can grow it. I've got my dark line of shrimp there, black rose. I have them on kind of a white and orange substrate, so some of them look really red, but when you get them into like a normal tank, they go real dark. This is the only line of shrimp I've line bred from Bloody Marys to the black rose, so probably the line of shrimp I'm most attached to because I've actually done the work on line breeding them. And then I have mystery snails, which I was not knowing the genetics and how they work on mystery snails, I was hoping to be able to line breed straight purples in this tank, but it looks like I'm going to end up with purples and blues with an ivory here or there. And then when you're feeding this much, you get a lot of the ram's horn.
Alright, let's ready, set, go. Alright, so we're moving down to this tank below here. And why don't you tell us what we got going on here?
So this is the first of what I would call like my breeding for profit tanks. I gave a talk kind of on this idea at our club meeting a couple months back, but basically I'm trying to layer a bunch of species where I can pull one bag of to take once a month to our auctions or to some event to sell. So I've got the guppy in here is a blue mosaic half moon. This is from Prius Pets up in Lansing, and I think Rick Prius works with this line directly. The females are just really gorgeous, well put together, huge. The male has a little red to it, so I'm not sure this is going to be the purest line, but it will be a really nice looking guppy. But I have it over Java moss for one, which is a plant that's You can always sell basically as much as you want. So that's growing in there slowly. I have mystery snails that I was hoping I could like line breed the purple, but again, not knowing the genetics exactly, I'm getting purple and blue, which will be a good combination to be able to grow out in there. I have shrimp, which are black rose and neocaridina shrimp, and they're kind of special to me because they're the first line that I kind of line bred directly from a Bloody Mary line to get to these blacks. And some of them look a little bit red or off color in this tank. I kind of keep my shrimp on bad substrates for their colors to make culling a little easier. But when you move them to another tank, they end up being really sharp looking. And then in here, but not breeding currently, that I was trying to layer as well. It's kind of the failed experiment would be I have some of the CPO crayfish, the Dork orange crayfish that I've bred before, but they're not working in this tank. I think it might be a little warm for them or not quite keeping it hard enough, keeping it hard enough with the plants and everything.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the talk you gave at the club because just a lot of my tanks are just groups of cichlids, and to think that, hey, there's a lot you can do with one tank if you're trying to just kind of make a profit or even to just support the hobby and to, kind of even out the spending you have on what you're buying fish wise. What's the plants here? Right here?
Yeah, that's a type of crypt. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an Undetta kind of variant or what. It's one that you go to some of the regional auctions, like I go to Motor City auction pretty much every one they have up in Detroit. And sometimes like the big plant was like $10 there.
Yeah.
So I decided to snag it up. I've been, maybe we'll get some video later. I've been playing with this fish room as far as light goes a lot. Like the Plecos I keep don't like light. I have very few of these tanks lit from above. We're using lights that Corey brought to light them up. And so both these plants have had no overhead lights. I have one light in the room that runs daily. It
looks super healthy.
Yeah, the crypt's grown a ton. I have a starter going. The smaller one was about half that size. So just kind of playing with how much light you actually need to grow some plants is kind of interesting to me. And I was kind of playing with that crypt. Not that that's going to necessarily be something that you sell off because they grow slow and they melt. They're not really worth it, but it was just playing and giving some cover to those fish.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. All right, so we're gonna move to the next thing here. This is a really cool tank that caught my eye when we first got here. What do you have going on here?
And this is a tank that is kind of, I blame on my wife because she shows almost no interest in the fish overall. But when you have the club meetings, sometimes during the auction you get a little caught up in things, and one of our better breeders, Jim Polini, brought these Tanganyikan cichlids. They're Calachromis red markops. And they're a mouth brooder. I always kind of wanted to do a mouth brooder. So I bought them with the plan of breeding them, and then I'd resell them, get the BAP points. But their common name is the Big Eye Tanganyikan, and my wife has fallen in love with this fish that when it's not in breeding dress, is really fairly plain, and I would kind of call it boring, but it's my wife's favorite fish, so now I have to keep them forever. So that's kind of, I've started building this tank around them. I found these tetras just another randomly at a store. Never seen them before. They call them, the common name were the purple spotted emperor tetra, but they get bigger than what I picture emperor tetras. I really like their looks. They kind of throughout the day get more colorful and less colorful, but they're very hardy and very boisterous, kind of work well in here. And then I talked Jim into giving me a pair of Burchardi if I was going down a Tanganyikan tanks. The Neolamprologus Burchardi have always been one of my favorites that I've not kept. So
these guys, I can see why your wife loves them. They're like showing off. They're like, each of them are just like, no, it's my turn. Look at this guy coming over here now. I mean, the character.
Yeah, they're pretty neat. They dig out pits. You can kind of see behind the crypt there where he's kind of going back to. The male will kind of dig out a pit, and it's almost like a sunfish kind of, you get that link to some of our American cichlids where they kind of have similar breeding behaviors are kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is a cool tank. I really like this. I got a little bit filming that Burchardi coming out. It was a nice looking one too.
Yeah.
Real healthy.
you make, one of the best reasons to go to fish club meetings of any sort is you make friends. And so Jim and I have gotten to the point where we don't really charge each other for fish. We give each other fish, and if we're done with it, we'll let the other kind of get the VAP points. But more importantly, when we get something rare, like as soon as I get that rare Livebearer bred, I know that's something he's going to want. We call it like a cover your butt fish, except for we don't say butt. You get them in the hand of another breeder you trust. So if you lose them, you have that line to come back to and get some to restart it. So
absolutely, yep. All right, so let's move down to this tank down here.
And this is probably my emptiest. And I do, like these tanks are very low, so I apologize to Corey for that. But
oh no,
this one's not set up very far yet. But kind of going back to that breeding for profit, I have a yellow line of shrimp I'm going to get in here set up pretty well. They're the golden back yellows that I got from another club member, Craig Chain, that kept bringing these really nice lines. And so I actually traded some of my white clouds we'll see in a bit, basically 1 for 1 to get some. And then from another example of getting something from Jim is that I got this little moss. It's Physidens, which is a really kind of neat moss. It's got like 1,000 little hands on it. Super low light, grows really slowly, and it's like doubled in size in probably like 3 months, and it's still like maybe the size of a baseball. And then I don't think I'm going to keep this Livebearer in here long term, but these are tiger limas, and this is something that they're a wild type Livebearer that they're pretty neat looking. There's nothing about them that really makes me fall in love with them, so I've kept them for a while, did the breeding. I think I might move them into a tank we'll see in a bit here, but it's one of those things where it came to the club. I like Livebearers, I got them, and so I bred them a bit, and you can kind of move them back into the club and let somebody else have that joy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really love these shrimp though. The line on the back of those shrimp, look at those. Those are sweet.
Yeah, and so cherry shrimp, to kind of go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, will get that line, and that's where I kind of first discovered like that line look, and I really liked it. In cherry shrimp, there's no control. You can't line breed for it. It just kind of depends on conditions they're in, and sometimes it'll be more prominent, sometimes it won't. But in this yellow line, you can get that to be prevalent all the time. So as far as I know, yellow is the only color of the Neos where you can get that line displayed. And I really like that stripe look down the back. I just think it's really neat.
Sharp. All right, cool. And then right over here, what do you have going on in this tank here?
So this is another one of the breeding for profit type setups. I have Java Muffs going again. On the bottom, this is a line of Guppies that is probably my favorite. These are the 24 karat gold Guppies that our club president has been bringing, but I got a pair and have been bringing them up. And they're probably one of the favorite Guppies I've ever seen. I absolutely adore them. But I have my regular cherry shrimp line I've been working with a long time, and there's just a ton of babies in there now. And then
let's see if I can catch any of these. You see all these, right down here.
I have some blue mystery snails, which I've kind of learned, came in with mystery snails. You'd think it's something that everybody's worked with, super easy. Don't need any sort of background on them. I'm kind of learning as I go with them even. That they need a certain temperature to get the humidity in the tank, even with the covers. So like this tank is 2 degrees cooler, but apparently doesn't create enough humidity for them to want to lay the eggs above the water line. So that kind of experiment failed. I have rabbit snails in there I'm working with now too, and I'm going to move those bigger snails out and sell them. And then I have in the top corner, kind of growing for cover for the Guppies, is pearl weed, which again I thought was a higher light plant, and this has been with no overhead light. There's a light at the top of the room, probably like 6 feet above it, and it's been growing relatively well with that amount of light.
I really like that. I really like that for some of the Livebearers and stuff, for the babies to kind of hang out in for cover.
Yeah, it's a really neat plant.
It's really dense.
My biggest flex so far is that I'm still duckweed free, so I've had that plant before and just never been able to bring it or get it, clean of duckweed. So I'm really enjoying it when I don't have duckweed on this tank to kind of fill that same, floating at the top of the water gives some cover.
Cool. Yeah, you can see those 24 karat little guppies. I mean, when I zoom in on these guys, I mean, jeez.
Yeah, and that's a female you're zooming in on. They're absolutely stunning. They're just unbelievable. Like, they're what started me into getting into guppies again is Alex bringing those and then liking them so much, and then I'm starting to explore some of these other lines.
Well, cool. Let's move on to the other racks here now. So, all right, now let's talk about this tank. This tank is kind of, I think, as far as scaping wise, I think is pretty amazing down here in the fish room. I noticed this when we came in. Talk a little bit about what you got going on here, and I'll try to kind of focus on what you're talking about.
Yeah, so this is the one tank that I kind of built to be a display tank down here. It's something I wanted to do for a long time, but it's a Hillstream setup, which typically kind of focus on Asian species, and you want a lot of flow. And so I kind of built this out of this love for these long fin white clouds, which I breed every year in an outdoor setup. So I have, these are all like 3rd or 4th generation on me working on them, and some of the females actually are coming really long as far as having like really long displayed fins, like this one down here in the right there. But so build it around those kind of species, but then I've always been fascinated by a lot of the small gobies that have come into the hobby pretty recently, and so I'm slowly starting to build that out. I have blue Stiphodon goby, which is probably, you know, the most common goby that will end up in here. I have a Thai micro goby. He's right on top of the rock.
Yeah, there he is.
Which may or may not come out. I just saw him pop his head out for a second, but couldn't do right. And then I have this breeding pair of desert gobies, which this is the female. And then over here in a cave on the other side is the male. That's a pretty spectacular fish if he's willing to come out at some point here.
Where's he at?
He's in the cave right now.
Oh.
But he'll probably come out. He likes to come out and dance for a second. But this is actually a breeding setup. I've gotten eggs from them once, so that's where I'm kind of like. This
they breed in the cave there.
Yep, a lot of gobies are either crevice breeders or cave breeders. So I've gotten eggs once. They take a long time to hatch, like 7 to 14 days, depending on the temperature. So it's really difficult to keep the eggs not fungusing that long. So this next time I'm going to let him kind of hatch them. But this is a tank that I'll be able to change throughout the life of its setup, because like there's a whole bunch of rhinogobia species I really, really want that are really, really rare. Right now, they're all my holy grail fish are trying to get a hold of these little gobies that will work their way into here. I've also got these really neat shrimp. I have a couple species of filter shrimp. The one's not visible, but these are the what they call the flower or bamboo ones.
These are spectacular.
They're like 2 inches long, 2.5 inches long. The other one I have is almost...
Here's my fingers so you can kind of get an idea of the size of these guys.
The other one's called the blue vampire or wood shrimp. It's probably twice the size of that. It's like the size of a crayfish, but it's got a lot of places to hide in here. I don't see it very often. I actually thought I might have lost it until I found the molt of it recently. I've got some whiptail cats. Here comes this goby out here, because he's just my favorite fish in this tank right now.
Look at that! Oh wow! What a show! What a guy! Wow! You know what else I didn't realize until you were talking, and now I can't take my eyes off of, is these blue rummy nose.
Yeah, and so they're called the Asian rummy nose too. They're almost, if you're a fisherman and you catch shad, when you kind of catch them, they have that feeling, like they have the real small slimy scales. So I don't know, they don't really feel like a tetra to me. They don't really feel like a barb. They almost feel like a little something different, like when you're actually holding them. But all of these are males. I don't have any females, but they're real spectacular. It's a real bright orange and a really like blue you don't see in many fish throughout the body.
I am loving this tank. As you're sitting here talking, every once in a while there's just a goby that pops out. There's a Hillstream loach that pops out. I mean, it's just really, and it's, look at there's another goby just popped out over there. It's just it's something where you're sitting here and something new pops out everywhere you look. I mean, you're looking here, and there's that guy again. What kind of goby was that again?
They're called desert gobies. I forget the scientific name. They're actually not that difficult to find, and they're really hardy fish. They're really great. They're actually pretty good for community aquariums.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not around all the time, but there's something you can see from time to time. And the female is really bland, but the males are spectacular. One of my favorite fish. I've had it before. I had it again. I'm also, having, because I do like stuff, not seeing it for a couple weeks and then seeing it. So I'm putting some of the shrimp that are, coastal stream breeders that live in fresh water, but will only breed kind of in, actually grow up in saltwater or brackish. So there's some Pinocchio shrimp that I've been looking for and haven't seen to get on camera, but that's, I'm enjoying that aspect of this tank, of stuff poking its head out and going back and making a lot of cover. And then working with some of the plants, like I have a lot of Anubias in here, but like over here is Bucephalandra, a species of that I'm working, that I haven't worked with anywhere else, but is fun to kind of grow it out.
So neat. I mean, it's so mystical the way that it hangs down and it has runners.
And that's the little Thai micro goby. That's actually fairly uncommon. That's full grown. So it's a really micro fish.
He's so small, I keep losing him in my. All right, let me right there. Oh, don't scare him away! Don't scare him! Oh, we caught a second of them.
But
and then you have
the Follow Walla catfish, which I put in here. I don't know if they'll stay in here long term. That's something I want to breed.
Yeah.
But they work well in this tank because I put a lot of light on this tank trying to grow algae. So many of the gobies and especially the Hillstream loaches want to kind of eat algae all day long. And so this tank gets a lot of stuff to try to grow the algae. That's why if you look at all the rocks, they've all got a little bit on it. That's because a lot of the little species are going to feed off that I want to keep long term in here.
I got to ask you, where did you get this piece of wood? It is spectacular.
That came from my local favorite store that I joke I moved closer to when I moved across town. It's like a mile and a half from me, so it's way too close to have a local fish store. But Clean Aquariums, the type of spider wood that he had.
Shout out to them. That is wow.
I bought it before I had the fish room, so I liked how it looked, and I kind of had this idea, and it's just been set up in there for.
I feel like I could talk about this tank for an hour. Not that, but look at these guys. I mean, these guys here, they literally look like they have baseball mitts on, and they catch a ball and they eat it. And they're directly in line with the wave maker. Shoots everything there. They catch it, they eat it. It's just, I mean, there's so many things to look at. Every time you look around, there's something popping out. There's the Hillstream loach. I mean, this is just such a cool tank to watch. There's so, and there's Hillstream loaches up here coming out of the woodworks. I mean, hats off to you. This is a really, really neat tank. I mean,
in the gobies and loaches, I do say, like, since I put so much rock work and plants and stuff to hide, they act completely differently. They do pop around and spar and everything a lot more. So, I have various beliefs on, like, cover necessary for certain fish, how much they actually need. You kind of watch your fish and kind of judge how they're reacting to their environment. But, like, all these little gobies and the Hillstream loaches, clearly having the cover makes them a lot more comfortable because I see behavior I didn't see when they were in a less covered tank.
Well, before we move on to the next thing, I want to talk about this thing set up right here. So what do you got going on here?
So I posted, recently in our Facebook group about asking if I was the only one that's crazy, but basically it's a nanny cam. It's one of the wise cams, and I'll move it when there's something I want to observe. Like I said, I was trying to breed those desert gobies, and so I have it. This is a car, phone mount that I could just stick to the glass, and that's magnetic. These wise cams have a magnetic base. I think it's the Wise Cam 3, but then it hooks up to your Wi-Fi, and I have a live stream of my fish tank anytime I want. But when you put the SD card, the micro SD card into it, you have like 24 or 48 hour playback. So once I notice there's eggs, I can go back and see kind of the behavior leading up to it, or have a little video of that. So I've used it in a couple different places, and basically I have 24 hour ability to see whatever I want to observe. And it has night vision on it, which works relatively well for this. I do think it bothers like the Plecos is why I haven't been able to use it, but like you can still see relatively well when this room's pretty much darked out.
Absolutely genius, and it just gives you a different insight because, as you know, fish keepers out there, it's you can't catch it all. You're not going to sit in front of the tank with and catch these moments. But if you have an ability to scrub 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours of film to get to where you want to see something in a matter of seconds, that's the technology that we have at hand that allows us to really advance this hobby. And kudos to you, Josh. That's a great idea. Here we're over on what, I don't know, what do you call this wall? The Pleco wall?
I do. This was my vision of the Pleco wall, which is going to change a little bit as I get the other rack set up.
Okay.
But these top two tanks at least will probably stay the same. This first one is my L333 breeding group, and it's like the biggest investment of time I've made in the hobby. I bought these guys as a fry smaller than any fry we've seen today so far. From a local breeder. It took every bit of 3 years to grow them out before I started getting spawning activity. But I've had them the whole time, you know. I bought 10, ended up with 9 breeders. And so this group has been spawning for me for about 2 years now. They've moved once. I've gotten 2 spawns since I moved them. But they're one of my favorite Plecos. They're like that intro level zebra type Pleco. They call them the King Tiger as well. They're really the same thing as an L66. But they get max of about 4 or 5 inches. I have one that I'm starting to think is a pretty big male in here. And this tank, you know, hopefully starts getting a bit more productive, but I have 2 sets like back there on that piece of log on the back. It's one of the fry that have been born since I moved to this house.
Yep.
So as far as Plecos go, they're a relatively fast grower for a non-ancistrous species. But
that's
kind
a nice chunky one there.
Yeah, the ones that tend to be in this end are my bigger males. I don't know that we'll be able to see it, but you know, these hypancistrous species are fairly easy to sex when they get this big. The males have pretty good odontals on their leading ray of their pectoral fin. So I'm trying to find my big one. This guy right here, you can kind of see on the front of that pectoral fin. They get really, you know, prominent, like little hairs. And that's on these hypancistrous species. You can kind of tell males from females pretty easy. So that's all I have in this tank, but
it's, I guess, obviously for somebody that's newer, and we're talking about L333s, which is typically a lot of cases somebody that really wants to get into the fancy Plecos and so forth, and a lot of times these are more available, you know, on a lot of stores and so forth. What's important for a tank like this to have going on? I see you have, you know, some current there. I see you have, you know, I mean, I guess the misconception, and this is kind of what I was trying to get to. Misconception is as long as you have LJ, they're going to be good to go. They're Plecos. Yeah. And that's not the case.
Well, and I don't want to be a gatekeeper on the breeding stuff too, so we'll talk about that a little bit. The one thing, just from a happiness standpoint, this wall is the whole reason I'm working with lighting the way I am, is that Plecos do not like a ton of light, first and foremost. I think that's kind of the most important thing. And so in this whole room I have kind of one overhead light for everything except for my Hillstream tank. Everything else is just done from kind of far away because, you know, this actual sunlight's intense, but these guys come from water that's tannin laden. There's actually a lot of interest or talking about how much we might be blinding our fish with some of these LED lights. So I'm really being pretty conservative on a lot of these tanks as far as light goes, but especially these Pleco tanks, the no direct light makes them a lot happier. They're out a lot more during the day on average. The next most important thing for just like keeping Plecos in general, I feel doesn't get talked about enough, is having some amount of driftwood in the tank. I think all Plecos, regardless of the species they are, either they get some sort of biofilm that works as like a probiotic for them, or something from eating the wood or eating stuff off the wood that grows on the wood that just helps them be healthy. I have way better luck with Plecos than most people, and I don't think I'm doing anything special as far as what I'm keeping the water. I think it's that couple things, like the driftwood, the light makes them happier. They're not so skittish running into stuff because they're a little blinded by it. Now, when it comes to breeding these, and when I was talking about growing them out, the whole time I grew them out in like a 29 or so gallon tank with just a sponge filter. There's plants in it. It was about 78 degrees. So to breed this Pleco, it needs to be in the mid to upper 80s.
Okay.
This tank is kept at 85. Really, most of the time I spike it to 86 or 88 to breed them. I think that's the biggest thing with these hype ancestral species that all seem to be wanting kept a little warmer. There is RO water that goes into this tank when I'm trying to breed them. When I'm not trying to breed them, it's just tap water. So my TDS is about 140, 150 normally. And I try to drop that down to somewhere in the 90s when I'm trying to spawn them. That's just to stimulate rain, basically. I think, a couple more generations of these L33s that are all bred in captivity, I think they'll be like Bristlenose. I think we won't need to change the water at all.
Yeah.
I have the flow going with the little wave maker. I don't know that that's important to spawning. I was actually talking when you first got here and we were looking at stuff ahead of time. They used to spawn right in front of the wave maker. In this tank now they're spawning at the opposite end away from the wave maker. I know it's kind of a common thing that fancy Plecos need flow to spawn. I really think it's an oxygenation thing, and so you always want, especially warmer tanks, it's harder to keep the oxygen content level up with warmer water being less willing to hold the oxygen. So, I have 4 different bubblers basically running in this tank most of the time to try to keep it well oxygenated, because these come from really fast flowing rivers originally.
Yeah, that's some knowledge bomb there, guys. I mean, everything he just said is truth. I mean, it's I can see them starting to come out. They're not used to the light, so they're like, I want to come out and all this stuff, but yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's pretty cool. I think that biofilm, especially when they're newborn and young, I think it helps jumpstart that, their digestive system, and I've heard that from so many people.
Yeah, I think babies, it's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where I put either a little tiny, I have a couple of little tiny pieces of driftwood or catappa leaves of some sort. You see them all the time where people put them right in the tumbler for the tannins to even help hatch the eggs, but it's the best first food for them. But that's one thing I forgot to talk about is feeding in. These hype ancestral species are almost 100% meat eaters. Now, I do put like vegetable matter, like there's zucchini in here right now I fed last night, and they love that. But when I'm spawning them, what I feed mostly to kind of trigger it is actually cocktail shrimp, like whole cocktail shrimp. It can be raw or it can be the pre-cooked. I think they kind of like the raw a little bit better. Yep. But super high protein food like that is what will kind of trigger the, them having enough eggs to even spawn. And it's one of the best things to feed Plecos like this because it doesn't degrade like a pellet will. They can rasp on it like they want to feed, and it's really good in that aspect.
Awesome. Let's move on to the next tank. All right, so now we're going to go over to this tank here, right next to the one we were just talking about.
So this has like 3 different species of fancy Plecos. This has the Inspector or Snowball Pleco, the 201. I have...
let me see, where's he at?
There's one in there.
Yep. I was going to say.
Then I have a group of 4 wild-caught leopard frogs that I've had for years at this point without any risk of spawning that I've still been working with. And then I have the Ancestris Wabbitmeister, the honeycomb Pleco. These are ones I've gotten fairly recently, have just started breeding for me.
Yeah, I saw these. You have them up here.
Yep, I have. That's the first spawn, and I have another spawn I just released back into the tank to see how they raise next to the parents, and I have a set of eggs that they just kicked out. They're really bad parents so far. These couple males, they're really young. They, this is their third spawn. So every one they've kicked out, and then I have to try to kind of raise them as independently. And,
you're talking about these guys right here?
Yep.
Okay, the L201s, have you had any luck?
I've had 2 spawns since I've moved. The first one I hatched they were doing great, and then I think I killed them, moving them. I had an old breeder box like I like to put them in when they get to be where they're not, you know, they're eating actual food and everything. Yep. I think I moved them to one that was contaminated, because as soon as I moved them, I lost the whole spawn. And then the second spawn, they kicked out of the cave, and I only got one of the eggs before they got eaten. So I try, most of the Plecos, you know, it's good to talk about. I want the male to hatch them till that first day they're true wigglers. And then I take the turkey baster, take the cave, and try to splash them out then. That's by far the easiest way and most successful way I've had. None of these have been super successful. So I bought these 201s as a breeding group already. I don't know how many successful spawns they've had. They're not good at keeping them in the caves at this point, which you have a lot with young Plecos. They kick them out. So hopefully they get a bit better at that in some time. But when they do kick them out, I kind of make my own little incubators. So you can do it in a egg tumbler that you put in. I like kind of this setup, which is like a plastic disc cup. I get these at Gordon's. And basically I'm able to replace the cup with a brand new one, so there's no contamination in it. So, you know, these I found this morning. So I put a couple drops of methylene blue. This is really blue at the moment. I don't know how well that's showing up in camera. I want to kind of like spike the methylene blue the first day or two. And then I'll start changing like 50% of this water daily till they hatch. So, you know, you kind of
neutralize
get
anything.
You get a protection from the fungus, but the methylene blue isn't healthy for the babies either. So if you're in too much of it when they're born, you lose a lot of the fry right away. So, you know, I saw a guy that like basically dips them almost in straight methylene blue and then immediately takes them out, puts them in a tumbler. I've been considering trying something like that, but this is what I've been working with so far, is kind of a heavy dose of methylene blue, and I like you know, having those almost disposable cups. You know, don't like wasting a bunch of plastic, but it seems to be really important to have kind of a fresh surface that's not, you know, no chance of fungus being previously there.
Yeah, there's a good shot of
that's one of the females, but they're really, really, you know, baby bristlenose and the brown look like that when they're born.
There you go. 201.
These Wabameisters kind of look like baby bristlenose the whole life, with the females having the white stripe on their tail.
She is chunky.
Yeah, I should.
She's ready to roll.
I'm hoping for another spawn every day. That's the worst thing about the Plecos, is you can see when they're ready to spawn, and then you start playing with the water parameters, but you don't want to play like daily. Like you get to a point, and then like right now I'm almost in a reset time with this. So I have my RO water runs right into it. I try to drop it. This tank I try to drop to about 70, because that's where the leopard frogs should have to go to spawn. And sometimes I'll get the 201s on the way down, right about the 80 or 90, kind of same as the 333s. I can tell when these leopard frogs are close to spawning, because so this is a male. I don't know how well it will show up on the camera, but on their tails they have all these like spiky little hairs. Those aren't on them all the time. Those are kind of a spawning dress type thing that they have. So I have two males, and they kind of show that when the water is kind of appropriate, but I've not actually gotten them to spawn yet. But those are wild caught. I expect those to be much harder. And then on the way back up is when I get, like, I think I had 2 spawns in that cup of the Wabameisters. When I get back up with a couple big water changes of tap water, they seem to trigger. So
it's interesting. That's really cool. Yeah, it's a lot going on, and there's did I see some you have something swimming around? What?
There's one single rainbow.
Oh, okay.
The Celebes rainbow.
Oh, okay.
Here, so,
I was gonna say, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I saw that one single there, just kind of using him as a little bit of a.
Yeah, I had the group in here, and I only had a couple, and I lost 1 or 2.
Okay.
They actually got stuck in the caves.
Gotcha.
So, now that the other fry are big enough, I should move it up with the fry.
Gotcha.
This tank is a lot more. The Plecos in here are a lot more aggressive. Like, they're not aggressive to each other, but I've had a hard time keeping fish in here. I don't know if it's the setup, and they end up getting stuck in the caves a little easier with the more Plecos, but you know, none of the males are very happy when they're kind of close to breeding dress and something ends up in their cave. It can be difficult. So
absolutely. Well, cool. Let's move on to the next one down here. All right, now we're down here to the tank just below the one we were just talking about. What do we got going on here?
So there's a handful of things. This has kind of been the tank I put stuff in that I've wanted but didn't necessarily have a place for. Very first in the core, it's pretty cool Cory. They're also from Eric Boderock's. They're the Barbados Cory, or I can't pronounce their scientific name, but I think
Super
they're actually
cool.
the longest. Like, if you're saying size of Cory by length, I think they're the largest. But they have like a cool, almost brindling kind of color to them. It's kind of hard to see. They have a speckling on their face. Again, really cool to be able to go to the OCA where Eric Boderock was just selling. You go into a hotel room, he has all these little containers set up with all the fish that you've wanted your whole life since you've known Eric Boderock.
Yeah. And you're like, can I buy these?
Yeah, and like these are his pre-spawn size. You know, they haven't grown much since I've got them. For $8 a piece.
Yeah.
You go to look to order these Corys online, and you're paying like
20, 30.
Yeah, at least. So really cool to be able to get that breeder's Cory for that amount of money. So I picked up a handful, even though I'm not a very good Cory spawner. I'm not probably going to have luck. I'll probably actually give them to our club's Cory spawner, who you have a video on his channel from his room, Kelly.
Yep.
But they actually need to be kind of cool. I don't think I can necessarily spawn them in my room anyway. They have to be like 68. I just don't have any tanks like that, but they're really neat.
Yeah, really neat. And then let's see here.
And then I have a couple just miscellaneous fish. I have one of my favorite kind of nano fish are these Japanese rice fish. This is a platinum one.
Yep.
And actually one of them doesn't have very much of the platinum. But like the one back by the Waster Tang, or you can actually get just like a Angel's Platinum. You kind of get that shimmering white to them. So these have been breeding pretty well. They lay in a mop and you can just pull the eggs. And so I have probably 7 or 10 fry right now in my little fry thing.
Are these good for like a summer tub?
They're
or would they not do well?
They're super good for a summer tub. I did the blue version I had 2 years ago, and I probably got 50 fry in a 55-gallon tank. So long as they have some plant cover, they do really, really well. I don't know why they're not more popular, especially like these whites, and they have a red line and an orange line that just look fantastic. But I could do a 50% water change in here with cold tap water. Like they're super adjustable to water temperature changes, because they come from being basically in where they're growing the rice in the 6-inch deep water that goes through these huge water changes naturally. So
yeah, these are more, I would say these are very popular fish, just not, I don't think as much as they should be in America.
Yeah, they're not widespread.
But they're really neat fish. I mean, they're stunning looking at it here. I'm trying to.
None of the females that I see are carrying the eggs, but it's really. Actually, that one is. So if you look on their kind of anal fin, I don't know if you can get a good enough close up.
I think I might.
But they carry the eggs around on their anal fin, and then until they have a pretty good group of them, they'll just go up and rub them up against something. But they don't really have a good classification. You see them on lists almost like a killifish a lot of times. But their eggs are exactly like rainbow fish eggs. You can pull them the same, they act the same, you catch them out the same. So really kind of a neat little fish, really easy breeding project. I pull the eggs rather than put them in a tank and take them back out, but they're really pretty easy.
And what do you got down here?
These are something I've always wanted to breed, and I'm going to strike out again on this group. They're the Checkerboard Cichlid. It's a dwarf cichlid, but I have all females once again. The males get like a nice little leer tail on it, and they get more. Their checkerboard pattern moves more to a stripe, so they're a really neat little dwarf cichlid. They breed like Apistos kind of, but I've always kind of liked them. They kind of have that darting movement, and they'll kind of act like an Apisto and where they habitate and defending these
Yeah.
areas and stuff, setting up little territories.
Huh.
But once I haven't had a male yet. Bought a couple groups and I've never had a male.
Huh. Let's move to the next tank here. All right. So we got, now is this newer wood you just put in that's starting to what do you want to call it? All right, now we're on to this tank over here. What do you got going on here?
So this is kind of a temporary tank for a lot of these things. You know, pseudo quarantine. I've had these fish quite a long time, but don't really have their long-term tank set up. So I have some Adelphi cories.
Right there, yeah.
I have a group of those from our local breeder. I have what's called the red lizard whiptail, which these, like most of them that you buy, aren't the true red lizard whiptail, and that they look really red when they're young, and they kind of become this more brownish, slight red tint as they get older, because they're actually probably a cross. But I always really like those, and I'm starting to get a little bit of breeding behavior. I want to breed them, and I have these Plecos that are the 173B, which is another kind of hypancystrus type. Kind of interesting in that the 173B comes from Aquarium Glaser in Germany, which the true 173 is like $100 to $200 an inch Pleco. It's super expensive, more expensive than the L46. Aquarium Glaser got some of the early ones that were found, put them with their private breeders, and then they sold 173, and then this line they called 173B, and they say it's just the colors are less desirable on them. People wonder if they got L333s crossed into them, so they're not as desirable. But I really like, you know, pattern on a couple of them. It's not so much a tiger stripe, it's more random, a little bit more white coverage when they were younger, especially. So
They almost remind me, the pattern in the randomness is kind of like almost like the Queen of Bisque. You know, just the patterns and stuff. But yeah, absolutely gorgeous.
So I have these in here and just keep fattening them up. I haven't really run RO water or anything, so this is kind of like a holding pattern, like I talked earlier. You're not always, don't always want to try to constantly breed these things. And then I have the original Peacock rainbows that I spawn in the mob, and they feed the Plecos.
Absolutely. Well, cool. That was definitely, those are the tanks. Now I want to go a little bit into just one of the interesting things I thought about this tour was this is your this is what, 2.0, Fish Room 2.0. You moved last year, and this is kind of what you've started to begin in this fish room here. And I guess I just wanted to take a second here and turn on the lights and just kind of look at a little bit of what you have going on in here quickly, just to kind of to kind of show these guys what your thoughts were on this and what you have going on. So I guess we can just start here. As far as I noticed, this was obviously pretty intentional here. You got, you know, the light strips above all the tanks installed there. I guess I'll just let you talk about what you want to kind of talk about here a little bit, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, so I guess you make mistakes in whatever first set you have, and you know, I've had one other fish room, I've had other fish racks, and you kind of go off of what you learn along the way. And you know, one thing I always like to point out, because not everybody does, is we have the loop that goes all the way around the room for air. So I have one single air pump that runs all the tanks here, and actually I could run probably 30 more tanks on this pump. I've actually got to work to not have back pressure on it, but the PVC loop goes all around, and I'm able to tap into it anywhere I want, and that's kind of like the heartbeat of the fish room. But when we were moving, I already knew I wanted a fish room, so we were looking for a space. I wanted compact, so this is about 11 feet long by 9 feet wide, maybe slightly more compact than I actually realize I want now, but you know, you go and you look at European fish rooms, all of them, there's no wasted space, and that's my
Yep.
long-term goal in here. Because I'm heating the room, I'm not
Yep.
heating any of the individual tanks. When I built the room, the ceiling has 30R insulation through it. The wall that I built has 15R insulation, which is, you know, kind of overkill for interior of the house, but I'm trying to trap as much of the heat in here as I can.
Yep.
To the point where basically I have a small cabinet heater, keeps this room at about 82 at kind of middle tank height.
Yeah. Down there, it's heating the whole room.
Yeah, and it doesn't run that often. Like, and like during the winter, I had to back it off because when the heat's actually running, I have a couple vents that come in here. It can get, I've had it 90 degrees in here before,
Yep.
Which is a little too warm. So you guys do that little playing a bit, but you know, compact was the first goal. So you kind of lay stuff out and you wanted it. I really had an idea of what tanks I wanted. So the first room I built, you ended up with a lot of you know, 2 of this size tank, 2 of this size tank.
Yeah.
I really love the 40 breeders working in. I really love the 10 gallons.
Yep.
And I like 20 longs and 20 highs. I like 20 longs only when they're in the correct
40s
layout.
here,
Yeah.
and then you know, then you got the row of the 10s up here.
Yeah, and this
And
3
then the
high was
40s.
important. Like when I'm talking compact.
Yeah.
You know, I did all
No
math and
wasted
work
space.
with
I
it.
mean,
Like,
you're looking at, you know, there you go, right there.
I figured how much space I needed to be able to get it net in comfortably. Like, you can't put all the decor you always want in every tank, but it's what you kind of sacrifice.
Yeah.
But I really wanted the sink in here, so that's why I kind of built out around this sink area.
Yeah.
I wanted the drains, so something we didn't talk about is I don't have an automatic water change system, but every tank is hooked up for drain so that I put water in.
Yep.
And then I built kind of the pseudo automatic change, which I use the beehive
Yep.
watering timer. Comes to there's 2 lines that go over, so I can put a temperature mixer, runs through 2 kind of sediment filters, and then basically I can set the timer. I can run the lines for 10 minutes if I want, or when I'm on the RO unit, I'll often set it up for 3 hours, and then I have the wastewater going to like the guppy tanks. Basically, I wanted like minimal waste, so like I said with the RO unit, all the wastewater then changes water on the Hillstream tank and the guppy tanks. Their TDS is like 240, which is great for them using just the wastewater. And then the Pleco tanks I'm able to lower with the
You know
RO.
what? I never even thought about that. I run my RO system and I just run it right to the sump. Why not use that water?
Yeah, especially if you're like Tanganyikan, it's great
Yeah.
for like, stuff. And how I have that running over, it's really temporary right now, but you can kind of see I have the irrigation line running over. I'm
Yeah.
gonna tie it up to the thing, but then where I want junctions, I can put a little T and then just drop it down into the tank. So all that needs to be a bit more, you know, I want it all the way to the top so it can't backflow.
Yeah.
But
That's a great idea. I never would have thought of that. Wow. Yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for allowing us to come into your fish room. I know myself, I've learned a lot today. And I think anybody watching this is going to say the same. So thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next tour, hopefully here in a year or so, once it's even bigger and crazier than this. Thank you.